Welcome to the Discourse Analyzer AI Toolkit, where articles come alive. You're listening to the audio version of our article. For the full text and an interactive experience, check out the link in the description below. Interact with any selection using our AI assistant to enhance your understanding. Let's explore.
Methodological Approaches in Intersectional Discourse Analysis. In the evolving field of discourse analysis, the integration of intersectionality provides a nuanced framework for examining the complexities of identity and power within communication. This approach recognizes that individuals' identities, encompassing race, gender, class, and more, are interwoven in ways that affect their experiences of oppression and privilege. To explore these intricate dynamics, researchers employ various methodological approaches that enable a deeper understanding of how discourses shape and are shaped by societal structures. This introduction outlines several key methodologies used in intersectional discourse analysis, each offering unique insights into the interplay of language, power, and identity. From the detailed examination of narrative structures to the critical analysis of visual media, these methods illuminate the multifaceted nature of human communication and its impact on social inequality. By leveraging these diverse approaches, scholars can uncover the often hidden mechanisms through which identities and power structures are constructed and contested within discourse. 1. Multi-layered analysis. In intersectional discourse analysis, a multi-layered analysis is crucial for exploring the nuanced ways in which various identities, such as race, gender, class, sexuality, and ability, interact within texts. This methodological approach helps uncover the complex dynamics of power, privilege, and oppression that are often embedded in language and discourse. 1. Techniques for multi-layered analysis. Point 1. Layered contextual analysis. Historical context. Analyze texts within the historical backdrop that influenced their creation, considering how historical events and movements impact the portrayal and reception of identities. Cultural context. Understand the cultural implications of the discourse, recognizing that cultural norms and values shape the way identities are constructed and understood in the text. Social context. Examine the social dynamics at the time of the text's production and reception, including the social hierarchies and power relations that influence discourse. Point 2. Intersectional thematic analysis. Identify themes. Pinpoint recurring themes within the text that relate to identity and power, such as resistance, marginalization, agency, or empowerment. Intersecting themes. Investigate how these themes intersect across different dimensions of identity, noting where they overlap, contradict, or reinforce each other. Point 3. Critical linguistic analysis. Lexical choices. Scrutinize the choice of words and phrases to reveal underlying biases or assumptions about certain groups. Syntax and structure. Analyze how the structure of sentences may signify power dynamics or identity positioning, such as passive versus active constructions or the use of specific grammatical moods and voices. Narrative voice. Consider who is speaking in the text and whose perspectives are prioritized or marginalized, and how this affects the representation of different identities. Point 4. Comparative discourse analysis. Across texts, compare how different texts handle similar themes or portray similar identities, noting variations and consistencies in representation and interpretation. Across media, extend the analysis to different media forms, e.g., print, digital, visual, spoken, to explore how diverse modes of communication impact the construction and perception of identities. Point 5. Engaging with counter-narratives. Elicit subaltern voices. Focus on voices and perspectives that are often suppressed or marginalized in dominant discourse, examining how these narratives challenge or complicate the mainstream narratives. Highlight resistance and agency. Pay attention to how marginalized groups assert their agency and resist dominant narratives within the text. 2. Implementing multi-layered analysis. Case study implementation. For instance, when analyzing speeches about immigration, a multi-layered intersectional approach might involve historical analysis, contextualizing the speeches within the history of immigration policies and racial attitudes in the host country. Thematic analysis. Identifying themes of belonging and otherness, and how these intersect with race, class, and legal status. Linguistic analysis. Examining the rhetorical strategies used to frame immigrants and the implications of these framings on public perception and policy. Multi-layered analysis in intersectional discourse analysis provides a comprehensive method for examining texts through various lenses that reflect the complexity of social identities and power relations. By systematically exploring the different layers of context, thematic content, linguistic structure, and comparative media, researchers can gain a deeper understanding of how identities are constructed, challenged, and negotiated in discourse. This approach not only enhances the richness of the analysis but also promotes a more nuanced and equitable understanding of the diverse experiences and perspectives that shape human interactions and societal structures. 2. Narrative methods. Narrative methods in intersectional discourse analysis focus on using personal stories and narratives to delve deeply into the lived experiences of individuals at the intersections of various identities. This approach emphasizes the power of personal narratives to reveal the complexities of identity, oppression, privilege, and resistance that traditional analyses might overlook. 1. Techniques for narrative methods in intersectional analysis. Point 1. Narrative collection. Interviews. Conduct in-depth interviews to collect personal stories directly from individuals, allowing them to express their experiences in their own words. Oral histories. Gather oral histories to understand the historical context of individual experiences and how these have shaped their perceptions and realities. Diaries and personal documents. Analyze personal documents like diaries, letters, and blogs that provide intimate insights into the daily lives and thoughts of individuals. Point 2. Narrative analysis. Structural analysis. Examine how the narratives are structured, what is included or omitted, how stories are organized, and what this structure reveals about the narrator's world. Content analysis. Identify and analyze themes, motifs, and symbols within narratives that relate to identity and intersectionality. Thematic coding. Use thematic coding to categorize data and uncover patterns across different narratives, focusing on how identities intersect and how these intersections influence experiences. Point 3. Reflexivity and positionality. Researcher's role. Consider the researcher's own identity and positionality and how these might influence the interaction with the narrative and interpretation of the data. Narrator's perspective. Be attentive to the narrator's perspective and how their identity influences their storytelling and the topics they emphasize or downplay. Point 4. Contextual and comparative analysis. Contextual embedding. Situate narratives within their broader sociopolitical and cultural contexts to understand how external factors influence personal experiences. Comparative narrative analysis. Compare narratives from different individuals to explore diverse experiences and perspectives, particularly how different intersections of identity shape their stories. 2. Implementing narrative methods. Case study implementation. For example, when researching the experiences of transgender women of color in healthcare settings, narrative methods might involve collecting narratives, gathering first-hand accounts through interviews or written submissions about their encounters with healthcare providers, analyzing narratives, identifying common themes such as discrimination, support, or misunderstanding, and analyzing how these experiences intersect with race, gender identity, and socioeconomic status. Comparative analysis. Comparing these stories with those of other groups, such as cisgender women of color or transgender white women, to highlight unique challenges and systemic patterns. Narrative methods provide a powerful tool in intersectional discourse analysis, allowing researchers to access and interpret the rich, complex personal experiences of individuals across multiple dimensions of identity. By emphasizing personal stories, this approach offers deeper insights into the nuances of identity and the myriad ways in which social structures impact individual lives. It not only enriches the analysis but also fosters empathy and understanding, providing a humanizing counterpoint to more abstract theoretical analyses. 3. Ethnographic content analysis. Ethnographic content analysis, ECA, combines the strengths of ethnography and content analysis to study cultural texts, allowing researchers to explore how intersectionality is represented and communicated in various media. This method is particularly adept at uncovering the nuanced ways in which identities and cultural meanings are constructed and disseminated through texts, whether these are written, visual, or multimedia. 1. Techniques for ethnographic content analysis in intersectional analysis. Point 1. Ethnographic observation. Participant observation. Engage with the cultural settings or communities where the texts originate or are consumed to gain insights into how these texts are interpreted and valued by different audiences. Field notes. Maintain detailed field notes to document observations and reflections, which can help contextualize the content analysis with ethnographic insights. Point 2. Systematic content analysis. Document collection. Gather a diverse range of texts such as media articles, advertisements, films, and social media posts that reflect cultural narratives and discourses. Coding process. Develop a coding scheme to identify and categorize themes, symbols, and discourse strategies related to intersectional identities within the texts. Quantitative and qualitative analysis. Apply both quantitative methods, e.g., frequency counts of themes or terms, and qualitative methods, e.g., detailed interpretation of text meanings, to analyze the data. Point 3. Contextual analysis. Cultural contexts. Analyze texts within their broader cultural and social contexts to understand how societal norms and values influence the construction and reception of intersectional identities. Historical contexts. Consider how historical events and narratives influence current discourses, particularly how they relate to power dynamics and identity politics. Point 4. Reflexivity and positionality. Researchers' reflexivity. Continuously reflect on how one's own background, biases, and assumptions might influence the research process and interpretations. Stakeholder engagement. Involve community members or stakeholders in the research process to validate findings and ensure that diverse perspectives are considered. 2. Implementing ethnographic content analysis. Case study implementation. For instance, when analyzing the portrayal of Muslim women in Western media, ethnographic content analysis might involve collecting media samples, gathering a variety of media portrayals across genres and formats to assess representation. Ethnographic engagement. Interacting with Muslim communities to understand their perceptions and reactions to these portrayals. Thematic and contextual analysis. Identifying recurring themes such as stereotypes or empowerment narratives, and analyzing these within the context of current socio-political climates and historical relations between the West and Muslim-majority countries. Ethnographic content analysis provides a comprehensive methodological approach that combines the detailed, contextual analysis of ethnography with the systematic techniques of content analysis. This approach is particularly valuable in intersectional discourse analysis as it allows researchers to examine how various identities are represented and intersect in cultural texts while considering the broader socio-cultural dynamics that influence these representations. By integrating detailed observation and systematic analysis, ECA enables a deeper understanding of the complexities involved in how intersectional identities are communicated and perceived in society. This method not only enriches the analysis but also ensures that it is grounded in the lived realities of the communities being studied, fostering a more nuanced and empathetic understanding of cultural discourses. 4. Critical Discourse Analysis, CDA. Critical Discourse Analysis, CDA, is a methodological approach that focuses on the role of discourse in the production and maintenance of social power and inequality. By examining the ways in which power dynamics are enacted, reproduced, and resisted within texts and talk, CDA provides a powerful tool for understanding the complex interplay of language and social structures. When integrated with an intersectional framework, CDA can deeply explore how various forms of social inequality intersect and manifest in discourse. 1. Techniques for critical discourse analysis in intersectional analysis. Point 1. Discursive practices and power structures. Identify discursive strategies. Analyze how language is used to construct social identities and power relationships. This includes looking at word choice, metaphors, framing, and narrative structures. Power relations. Focus on how texts and talk serve to maintain or challenge existing social hierarchies and power relations, particularly through the depiction of different social groups. Point 2. Sociopolitical context. Contextual analysis. Situate the discourse within its broader sociopolitical context to understand how historical and current power dynamics influence and are influenced by the text. Institutional structures. Examine how institutional practices and policies impact the production of texts and the dissemination of discourses, particularly those that perpetuate or challenge inequality. Point 3. Multimodal analysis. Beyond text. Include analysis of non-verbal elements, like images, layout, and topography in written texts, or tone, emphasis, and pauses in spoken texts, to understand how these contribute to the overall meaning and potential impact of the discourse. Integration of modes. Analyze how different modes of communication interact to produce complex meanings that may reinforce or contest intersectional inequalities. Point 4. Interdisciplinary perspectives. Theoretical integration. Draw on theories from sociology, linguistics, psychology, and cultural studies to inform the analysis, ensuring a rich, multidimensional understanding of discourse. Intersectional focus. Explicitly incorporate intersectionality to examine how different identity categories, such as race, gender, class, sexuality, and ability, intersect within discourse to create unique experiences of privilege or oppression. 2. Implementing critical discourse analysis. Case study implementation. For example, in analyzing political rhetoric around immigration policy, CDA can be used to analyze speeches and debates. Examine how politicians use language to construct narratives about immigrants, focusing on how these narratives intersect with race, class, and nationality. Public and media reactions. Study media coverage and public discourse in response to these political statements to see how different narratives are adopted, challenged, or transformed across various platforms. Policy documents. Analyze policy texts to uncover the implicit and explicit ways in which legal language impacts different groups of immigrants, paying particular attention to how policy discourse intersects with social identities. Critical discourse analysis, when applied in conjunction with intersectional theory, offers a profound approach for dissecting the ways in which texts and talk both reflect and shape social inequalities. By focusing on the micro-level details of language use as well as the macro-level contexts in which language operates, CDA provides a comprehensive tool for understanding the dynamics of power and inequality as they are experienced and resisted across intersecting axes of identity. This approach encourages a critical examination of both the content and context of discourse, promoting a more nuanced and socially aware discourse analysis. 5. Frame analysis. Frame analysis is a methodological tool used in discourse analysis to examine how information is organized, presented, and interpreted through various frames of reference. These frames, essentially cognitive structures that help individuals and societies perceive and process information, can significantly influence how topics such as identity, power, and inequality are understood and discussed. When applied in conjunction with intersectional analysis, frame analysis can reveal how intersectionality itself is framed and understood in different social and cultural contexts. 1. Techniques for frame analysis in intersectional analysis. Point 1. Identification of frames. Frame discovery. Systematically identify the frames used in texts or talks to represent various social issues or groups. This involves looking for patterns in how issues are characterized, including the presence of metaphors, catchphrases, stereotypes, and other rhetorical devices. Frame categorization. Classify these frames to understand the dominant narratives and assumptions they convey about intersectional identities and issues. Point 2. Analysis of frame construction and effects. Source analysis. Examine who creates and disseminates particular frames, understanding their potential motives and the power dynamics involved. Impact on perception and behavior. Study how these frames influence public perception and behavior toward the framed subjects, especially in terms of policy-making or social attitudes. Point 3. Contextual influence on framing. Historical and cultural contexts. Contextualize the frames within historical and cultural narratives to understand why certain frames are more persuasive or dominant than others. Economic and political contexts. Analyze how economic and political conditions influence framing practices, particularly how they might serve to maintain or challenge existing power structures. Point 4. Intersectional frame analysis. Intersecting frames. Focus on how different identity categories, e.g., race, gender, class, are combined in framing practices, examining the nuances and complexities this intersection introduces. Counterframing. Explore the presence of alternative frames that contest dominant narratives, particularly those emerging from marginalized communities. 2. Implementing frame analysis. Case study implementation. For instance, in examining media coverage of gender-based violence, frame analysis could be used to identify dominant frames, identify and analyze the predominant frames used in media portrayals, such as victim blaming or narratives of empowerment. Analyze intersectional nuances. Examine how these frames interact with representations of race, class, or sexuality. For instance, how the media frames violence against transgender women of color compared to cisgender white women. Evaluate effects. Study the effects of these frames on public understanding and policy responses to gender-based violence. Frame analysis provides a vital methodology for intersectional discourse analysis by allowing researchers to dissect how different social issues and identities are constructed and understood through specific lenses. By examining both the content and context of these frames, as well as their production and impact, researchers can gain a deeper understanding of how intersectional identities and issues are communicated and perceived. This approach not only highlights how power and inequality are reproduced in discourse but also offers insights into potential areas for change, challenging dominant narratives and fostering a more inclusive understanding of diverse experiences and perspectives. 6. Positioning theory. Positioning theory offers a dynamic framework in discourse analysis, focusing on the ways identities are constructed and negotiated within specific discourses through the positioning of oneself and others in conversation. This theory examines the narrative contexts in which speech acts occur and how these acts serve to locate speakers and listeners in particular social, cultural, or moral orders. In the context of intersectional analysis, positioning theory provides tools for understanding how various aspects of identity such as race, gender, class, and sexuality are articulated and interwoven in everyday interactions and discourses. 1. Techniques for positioning theory in intersectional analysis. Point 1. Identification of positioning acts. Positioning analysis. Identify instances in the discourse where individuals position themselves or are positioned by others. These can include overt declarations, the use of particular language styles, or the implicit assumptions revealed through language. Role allocation. Observe how roles and identities are allocated in conversations, noting how these roles support or challenge existing social norms and power structures. Point 2. Analysis of storylines. Narrative contexts. Examine the storylines that emerge in discourses, which help to understand the context and meaning behind specific positioning acts. Coherence and disruptions. Analyze how these storylines either maintain coherence or are disrupted by alternative narratives, especially those that intersect various identity categories. Point 3. Intersecting identities and positioning. Intersectional identities. Focus on how multiple identities are navigated and negotiated within discourse, paying special attention to moments where these identities may conflict or coalesce. Dynamic positioning. Study the fluidity and dynamics of positioning in relation to intersectional identities, observing how positions may shift depending on the context or audience. Point 4. Power and resistance in positioning. Power dynamics. Analyze how power relations are constructed and contested through positioning strategies. Forms of resistance. Identify forms of resistance in positioning, where individuals or groups challenge the roles or identities imposed on them by broader societal narratives. 2. Implementing positioning theory. Case study implementation. For example, in analyzing classroom interactions, positioning theory could be applied to explore teacher-student interactions, how teachers position students and vice versa, particularly looking at how identities related to race, gender, or socioeconomic status influence these dynamics. Peer interactions. How students position each other within peer groups and how these positions reflect broader social identities and inequalities. Educational narratives. how educational goals and values are communicated through positioning, and how these might reinforce or challenge societal norms. Positioning theory in intersectional discourse analysis offers a nuanced approach to understanding how identities are constructed, expressed, and contested in everyday discourse. By examining how individuals position themselves and others, and the narrative contexts in which these positions are taken, researchers can uncover the complex interplay of power, identity, and resistance in social interactions. This approach not only deepens our understanding of how discursive practices shape and are shaped by intersectional identities but also highlights potential sites for social change and empowerment within these discourses. 7. Visual discourse analysis. Visual discourse analysis, VDA, is a methodological approach that extends traditional discourse analysis to the realm of visual media. This approach is critical for understanding how visual representations contribute to and shape the discourses surrounding intersectionality. By analyzing images, videos, and other visual forms, VDA examines how visual elements are used to represent, construct, and negotiate identities and power relations. 1. Techniques for visual discourse analysis in intersectional analysis. Point 1. Semiotic analysis, signs and symbols. Focus on the signs and symbols used in visual media and what they signify about cultural, social, and individual identities. Iconography. Study the use of common and culturally specific imagery to see how certain identities are portrayed and how these portrayals relate to broader social narratives. Point 2. Composition and design. Layout and framing. Analyze how the composition of a visual text, like the placement of subjects, use of space, and perspective, can influence viewer perceptions of power, status, and relationships between different groups or individuals. Color and light. Examine how color schemes and lighting are used to draw attention, evoke emotions, or convey symbolic meanings related to identity and intersectionality. Point 3. Intertextuality. Reference to other texts. Identify references to other visual or textual media that enrich or complicate the understanding of the visual text being analyzed. Cultural references. Study how visuals connect with broader cultural discourses, such as references to historical events, popular culture, or art movements. Point 4. Audience reception. Viewer interpretations. Investigate how different audiences perceive and interpret visual media, focusing on how their interpretations are influenced by their own identities and experiences. Participatory analysis. Engage with audiences directly to gain insights into their perceptions and emotional responses to visual representations. 2. Implementing visual discourse analysis. Case study implementation. For instance, in analyzing advertising campaigns, visual discourse analysis could be applied to analyze ad imagery. Examine how advertisements use visuals to portray gender, race, and class. Look at how these advertisements position products within certain lifestyle choices and what this suggests about societal norms. Intersecting identities. Explore how ads might combine visual elements to represent intersectional identities, such as featuring women of color in roles traditionally associated with white men. Audience reaction studies. Collect data on how various demographic groups respond to these ads to understand how effectively or problematically intersectionality is conveyed through visual means. Visual discourse analysis provides a comprehensive framework for understanding how visual representations shape and are shaped by intersectional identities and power dynamics. By analyzing the visual construction of identity and the interplay of images with cultural narratives, VDA offers profound insights into the symbolic dimensions of discourse. This approach not only enriches the discourse analysis by incorporating the visual dimension but also highlights the importance of visual culture in constructing and negotiating social meanings. It underscores the power of visuals in articulating complex identities and in influencing societal perceptions and behaviors. Conclusion. The exploration of methodological approaches in intersectional discourse analysis reveals a rich landscape of techniques that allow researchers to delve into the complex interplay of identities within various communicative forms. From multi-layered analysis that considers contextual, thematic, and linguistic elements to narrative methods that bring personal experiences to the forefront, each approach provides unique insights into the construction and impact of intersecting identities. Ethnographic content analysis and critical discourse analysis further enhance our understanding by situating discourse within broader sociopolitical contexts and examining the power dynamics at play. Visual discourse analysis extends these inquiries into the realm of visual media, highlighting how images and visual representations contribute to societal narratives around identity and power. Each methodology, with its specific focus and techniques, contributes to a more comprehensive understanding of how discourse shapes and is shaped by social structures, revealing the ways in which language and communication serve as arenas for both the reinforcement and challenge of social inequalities. By employing these varied approaches, scholars and practitioners can gain a deeper appreciation of the nuanced ways in which individuals navigate their intersecting identities, offering critical insights that can inform policy, education, and broader societal discourse. This rich methodological toolkit not only broadens the scope of discourse analysis but also deepens its ability to foster a more inclusive and equitable understanding of social reality. Frequently asked questions. What is multi-layered analysis in intersectional discourse analysis? Multi-layered analysis in intersectional discourse analysis involves examining texts through various lenses such as historical, cultural, and social contexts, allowing researchers to uncover how different identities and power dynamics interact within discourse. It includes techniques like layered contextual analysis, intersectional thematic analysis, and critical linguistic analysis. How does narrative methods contribute to intersectional discourse analysis? Narrative methods focus on personal stories to explore the nuanced experiences of individuals at intersections of identities. Techniques include narrative collection through interviews or oral histories, narrative analysis to unpack structures and themes, and contextual and comparative analysis to understand broader societal influences. What is ethnographic content analysis? Ethnographic content analysis, ECA, combines ethnographic methods with content analysis to study cultural texts. It includes ethnographic observation to understand how texts are perceived within communities and systematic content analysis to examine the themes and representations within those texts. What role does critical discourse analysis, CDA, play in intersectional discourse analysis? CDA helps analyze how power relations and social inequalities are enacted and resisted within texts. It focuses on discursive practices, power structures, and the socio-political contexts that shape discourse, using tools like the Discourse Historical Approach and Sociocognitive Approach. How is frame analysis used in intersectional discourse analysis? Frame analysis examines how issues and identities are framed within discourse. It identifies and analyzes frames for their impacts on perception and behavior, exploring how different frames interact and the effects they have on public understanding of intersectional identities. What is positioning theory and how is it applied? Positioning theory analyzes how individuals position themselves and others in discourse, affecting identity and social dynamics. It studies narrative contexts, the roles people adopt, and how these roles reflect and challenge societal norms and power structures. What is the significance of visual discourse analysis in studying intersectionality? Visual discourse analysis explores how visual media contribute to discourses of intersectionality by analyzing visual elements like imagery, composition, and design. It looks at how visual representations shape and reflect identities and power relations across different social intersections. How are intersectional identities analyzed using these methodologies? These methodologies allow for a comprehensive analysis of intersectional identities by examining how various identities such as race, gender, class, and sexuality are constructed, represented, and interact within different forms of discourse. Each methodology provides unique insights into the complexities of identity and power. What challenges might researchers face when applying these methodologies? Challenges include managing the complexity of multiple layers of analysis, ensuring accurate representation and interpretation of narratives, dealing with subjective interpretations in visual analysis, and the need for deep contextual knowledge in frame and positioning analyses. How can these methodological approaches impact policy and social change? By revealing the nuanced ways in which power and identity are negotiated in discourse, these methodologies can inform policy making, advocacy, and educational efforts, promoting more inclusive and equitable social practices that recognize and address intersectional identities.